Hi everyone, welcome you to OPM 303 Supply Chain Management subject. Under this subject, our first lesson is Introduction to Supply Chain. So in this video, I'll discuss with you what we mean by a supply chain. Have you ever thought how these products are coming to your doorstep? So these products are coming to our doorstep as a result of a supply chain. So what we mean by a supply chain? So supply chain in simple is a process of getting a product from point A to point B. You can see in this diagram. So you can see the point A and point B. So when a product is moving from point A to point B, we identify it as a supply chain. So in a normal supply chain or in a basic supply chain, we can identify three main parties in the supply chain: the supplier, the manufacturer, and the customer. Okay, so if you refer this slide to the previous slide, so the point A you can see at the supplier side and the point B you can see at the customer side. So when a product is moving from point A to point B or from supplier to customer, we identify it as a supply chain. So in supply chain analysis, we define ourselves as the manufacturer. So the focal point of the supply chain is manufacturer. So you stand at the middle of this chain, or among these three entities, you stand at the middle point. Identify yourself as the manufacturer. So on your one hand you see your supplier, and on the other hand you see your customer. So your relationship between supplier we call as the upstream of the supply chain, and your relationship between customer, or between you and your customer, we identify as the downstream of the chain. So we can identify there are different types of flows in a supply chain. So one is the product flow, which is happening from supplier side to customer side. So in terms of materials, components, services, and as finished products. So again, if we refer to the slide which talks about moving a product from point A to point B, so you can see at the point A there are some raw materials start moving in the supply chain, and at the final stage at the point B with the customers, you find the finished products. So the next flow in the supply chain is cash flow. So when we are purchasing products as customers in the supply chain, we have to pay for those products. So payments for products is happening in supply chain. So the fund flow is happening from customer side to supplier side in the supply chain. Apart from these two, there's another flow we can say we call the information flow. The information flow will happen to both directions. That means from supplier side to customer side, as well as from customer end to supplier end. If I take an example, the information about the products will flow from supplier side to customer side. The information about the customer needs and wants, their level of satisfaction. So this information will flow from customer side to supplier side. Apart from these three, there's another flow that we can see in today's sustainable supply chains, that is called reverse product flow, where the products are flowing from customer side to supply side in terms of return for repairs, replacements, products for recycling purposes, etc. So this is how we can see these flows in a supply chain. So you can see the three main entities are functioning in the supply chain and how the flows are happening in the supply chain. Moving on, so with all this information, we can define a supply chain as all parties involved directly or indirectly in fulfilling a customer request. So in these definitions, we are clear about in fulfilling a customer request, but there are some unknown terms. One is all parties involved, directly or indirectly. So what we mean by all parties involved? All parties means, as we see in the basic supply chain, there are three main entities: supplier, manufacturer, and the customer. But in real world complex supply chain, we can see there are a lot of parties involved in between these parties in order to make the supply chain more effective and efficient. As example, the warehouse providers, transportation providers, distributors, retailers, wholesalers, agents. So likewise, there will be different parties involved in the supply chain. So we consider all these parties as parts of the supply chain. So that's why we call all parties involved in the supply chain, and their involvement may happen in a direct or indirect way. So some might involve in the supply chain directly, or some might provide some services indirectly. So all these parties we consider as part of the supply chain. And as I told you, since there are a lot of parties involved directly and indirectly in a supply chain, we can identify this supply chain as a network or a supply web. As in this diagram, we can see suppliers in different tiers, and also some parties involved as distributors. So there are a lot of parties involved in the supply chain. So we consider this as a web. If I take an example, just assume you as the manufacturer, you manufacture cake. Okay, so in order to manufacture cake, you need different types of raw materials. So you have to take this raw material from different types of suppliers. As example, you need to get flour, you need water, you need butter, you need sugar, you need vanilla. So likewise, so you have to get these products from different suppliers, and once you manufacture this, in order to send this product to customers, you need some party's help, maybe as distributors, maybe as warehouse providers. So in real world, there are a lot of parties involved in the supply chain. So we consider this supply chain as a web in the real world. Thank you.